Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into a world of stone castles, flickering torchlight, and secrets pressed between ancient bedsheets. Picture yourself wandering down a muddy medieval lane, the air thick with the smell of smoke and wet earth, a scratchy linen shift clinging to your skin. You pass silent women with eyes lowered and men who seem to measure you in glances. Above all, there's a hush, an expectation, as if every step you take leaves an invisible trace on your family's reputation. The world's watching, but not for your ideas. Tonight you're prized for what you haven't done, not what you have. And let's be real, if you time-travelled here with your modern outlook and favourite TikTok, you probably wouldn't survive a week. For women in the Middle Ages, your opinions are like the parsley on the royal feast, technically present, mostly ignored. Your purity, on the other hand, is the main course, dessert and midnight snack all in one. So, before we go any further, if this quiet space makes you feel even a little less alone, you can like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right to your heart. And hey, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Are you lying awake in a quiet room at 2 AM? Or maybe starting your day in a rainy city, eyes still heavy? Drop your time and place in the comments. Let's remind each other we're not alone out here. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, and let's begin tonight's slow, strange journey. Together, here on Timeless Sleep. You trudge through a landscape where your future has already been written by the people around you. Mostly men with powdered faces and suspiciously clean hands, hunched over parchment, deciding your fate. From the day you're born, your value isn't measured by how clever you are, how funny your jokes, or even how skillfully you can mend a torn tunic. It's something quieter, more secret, and, if we're honest, a lot more uncomfortable: your virginity. Not your heart, not your mind. Just that one small, hidden part of you, assigned the job of upholding your whole family's legacy. Medieval families, especially the ones who owned more than 2 spoons and a plot of land, obsessed over bloodlines. They believed purity preserved power, just like pickling kept vegetables from going bad. The entire game of inheritance, marriage and social status rested on the fragile premise that a daughter could be delivered to her wedding night untouched, preferably as naive as a lamb and just as quiet. And so, you become less a person, more a vessel, like a priceless goblet that mustn't have so much as a chip. Your mother inspects you with worried eyes, always reminding you to walk modestly and speak softly. She remembers her own terror as a girl and she wants to protect you, but her protection looks suspiciously like control. If you try to ask about love or dreams or why the neighbour's son seems so interested in embroidery, she only sighs, smoothing your hair, and changes the subject to something safer, like the weather or the proper way to churn butter. Because anything else is risky. After all, one wrong word, one curious glance, and the rumour mill will start up faster than you can say heretic. Historians still argue whether families truly believed these rules were moral imperatives or if they were just the only insurance policy available. Maybe it was both. A tangled web of faith, fear, and the desire to pass on the right sort of nose. Either way, your virginity is a family investment, like a particularly fragile heirloom passed down from anxious grandmother to anxious mother to you. Drop it, lose it, or, heaven forbid, give it away, and the whole house could collapse. You can almost hear the whispering. Did you see the way she danced at the festival? Not proper. Did you notice her laugh? Too loud. Even a joke about apples and snakes is enough to earn you a second glance from the village gossip. It's as if everyone's keeping score and you never got to read the rulebook. Meanwhile, your opinions are like crumbs swept under the rushes. Present, but always underfoot. On market days, while men discuss land prices and local politics, you hover nearby, knowing not to interrupt. Your father might toss you a smile if you keep your hands folded and your eyes low, but step out of line and you're more likely to get a lecture than a loaf of bread. You learn early that being invisible is safer than being interesting. It's almost an Olympic sport. The high jump of staying unnoticed, the marathon of holding your tongue. There are stories of women who dared to speak up. Stories told in hushed tones over washing basins and in the back pews of church. Sometimes these women are praised for their courage, but more often their names are followed by a shake of the head and such a pity. One girl who questioned why her brother could wander the fields at dusk while she had to stay in and card wool found herself accused of tempting the devil. Another, who read her father's old Latin books, disappeared one day and was never spoken of again, except as a warning. And let's not forget the tragic tale of Lady Eleanor, who had the misfortune of being clever and beautiful. 2 strikes against her in a world where women were supposed to be one or the other, never both. Yet beneath all the fear, there's a practical side to the obsession. Marriages are strategic moves on a chessboard, not love stories. A union with a wealthy merchant or minor lord could save your family from starvation or disgrace. If your reputation is spotless, your father can negotiate a larger dowry or a more lucrative match. If it's not, well, there's always the nunnery or a hasty marriage to the village thatcher's second cousin, who rumour has it eats onions by the handful and sleeps in his boots. And what of love? That's a luxury for the lucky or the foolish. In most cases, you meet your betrothed for the first time just days before the wedding, if at all. Your own feelings on the matter are as relevant as the opinions of the family cow. If you try to object, you're told, love will come after marriage. If you dare to ask why, your mother shushes you, her voice trembling between hope and resignation. You wonder if she ever loved your father, or if she just learned to make the best of a bad hand. The walls in these old houses are thick, but secrets have a way of echoing through the generations. At night, when you curl up on your straw mattress and listen to the mice rustling in the thatch above, you dream of other lives, of running through fields without a chaperone, of singing loud and laughing louder, of speaking your mind without fear. Sometimes, you dream of being so clever and brave that even the village priest would have to listen. Then you wake to the morning bell, and the dream fades, replaced by the familiar weight of expectation. And so, you learn to play the game. You become an expert at saying just enough to be pleasant, but not so much as to attract attention. You master the art of agreeing with whatever the menfolk are saying, even if you know it's nonsense. Yes, Uncle Gregory, I'm sure the moon really is made of cheese. You fold your dreams away like winter blankets, hoping maybe, someday, it will be safe to bring them out again. Even celebrations are shadowed by suspicion. At festivals you dance only when asked, and never too enthusiastically. Your mother's eyes follow you everywhere, a silent reminder of what's at stake. Sometimes you envy the boys their freedom, their jokes, their noisy games, the way they can disappear for hours and return only to be greeted with laughter, not scolding. You wonder if they ever think about what it means to be watched, weighed and measured day after day. There's humour in it too if you squint. The lengths people will go to protect you are sometimes more embarrassing than any scandal could ever be. Your aunt tells the story of a noblewoman whose father hired a guard to follow her everywhere, even into the garden. The poor girl couldn't pick a cabbage without an audience. You hear about another who had to wear a bell, like a particularly valuable goat, so everyone always knew where she was. It's a wonder anyone managed to get married at all. But the stakes are real. The consequences for stepping out of line are severe. One whispered accusation can ruin not just your life, but your whole family's fortunes. You know this because you see it happen. A neighbour girl sent away, a marriage cancelled, a father's shoulders bent under the weight of shame. You see the fear in your mother's eyes, the way your father's voice goes hard and brittle when he talks about honour. It's a heavy burden, and it's one you never chose. Still, historians debate just how universal these rules really were. In the big cities, among the merchants and artisans, there's a little more room to breathe. Some women own businesses, run taverns, even manage estates while their husbands are away. But even there, the idea of purity clings like a stubborn stain, never quite washing out. The rules are bendable, but never breakable, not without a price. And so, as you grow from girl to woman, you learn that your most valuable possession is the one thing you can't show, can't discuss, and certainly can't defend once someone decides to question it. It's a strange sort of power, one that leaves you feeling helpless and exposed all at once. You wonder if things will ever change, if someday women will be valued for their minds and hearts, not just their bodies. You wonder if anyone will remember your name, or if you'll just become another quiet ghost in the family tree. But for now, you do what you must to survive. You keep your secrets, hide your dreams, and walk softly through a world that judges you by a standard you never agreed to. It's exhausting, sometimes absurd, and occasionally hilarious. If you can find a way to laugh at the madness, you cling to the hope that someday someone will see you for who you are, not just what you're supposed to be. And as the moon rises over the thatched roofs and the village settles into uneasy sleep, you close your eyes and try to dream of something better. A world where women's voices matter as much as their virginity, and where every girl is free to write her own story. You wake to the chill of dawn, your breath curling in the air as you wrap a worn shawl tighter around your shoulders. The sun isn't up yet, but the house is alive. Your mother bustling in the kitchen, your father stoking the fire, your younger siblings still curled together like puppies in a blanket pile. The day begins the same as any other, but beneath every ordinary routine, a silent calculation runs. What is your purity worth today? You can feel it in the glances exchanged over porridge, the subtle nods as your father reminds you to keep your head down at the market. Your mother's careful braid, the way she tucks every strand away, isn't just about neatness. It's about signalling wordlessly that her daughter is unspoiled, untouched, still worthy of being wagered in the highest stakes game in town. You wonder what it would be like to be seen for your thoughts, for the stories you dream up at night instead of this ever-present unspoken question. Are you still pure? It's an invisible economy, this trade in purity. Families with daughters become entrepreneurs of a strange personal kind, treating your future not as a possibility, but as an investment. You hear it in every negotiation, every worried whisper behind closed doors. She's still untouched, she's well behaved, she can fetch a good match. Your father spends more time talking to local merchants about your prospects than he ever spends talking to you about your hopes. You suspect he doesn't really want to know what you think, just that you'll make him proud by staying quiet, staying safe, staying pure. Sometimes you imagine the world flipped upside down. Women in smoky taverns bargaining over the purity of eligible men, deciding who's good enough to marry their daughters. The idea makes you snort into your cup of a weak ale. If only that were the way of things, maybe you'd have some say in your own fate. But for now, the value of your purity outshines everything else. In medieval society, daughters are often compared to fields, meant to be fertile, but not yet ploughed by another man's hands. You overhear an old woman at market say, "A pure daughter is worth more than a cart of silver." You wonder if anyone has ever actually seen such a cart, or if it's just a fantasy mothers tell themselves as they scrub the same stain out of the same dress for the 100th time. Historians still argue whether this obsession with purity was driven more by religious doctrine or the cold reality of economics. After all, marriages cemented alliances, united property, and ensured that wealth didn't leak away into the wrong family tree. Your purity isn't just about pride, it's about protecting the family fortune. If your reputation is clean, your father can demand a higher dowry, maybe even marry you up the ladder to someone a little richer, a little more powerful. If a whisper spreads, though, the calculations change. Suddenly, your future is worth less than the family pig, and your parents' dreams come crashing down like an unlucky shelf in the pantry. In the village, everyone knows who's been spoken for and who's still on the market. The gossip is as constant as the church bell. On feast days, women gather by the well, swapping stories and evaluating every girl's prospects with the seriousness of seasoned traders. She's quiet, never raises her voice. Good. That one laughs too much. Trouble. Even your posture is part of your reputation. Walk too proudly and people wonder if you have something to hide. You become an expert at blending in, perfecting the delicate art of looking presentable but not presumptuous, attractive but not alluring. Your dress can be fine but never flashy. Your hair must be smooth, but not inviting. You move through life with a wary grace, always aware that a single misstep could cost your family everything. It's exhausting, this constant dance, like walking a tightrope over a pit of hungry gossips. Your father, meanwhile, becomes a sort of salesman. He parades your best qualities, your modesty, your gentle voice, your spotless reputation, like goods at a fair. You hear him discussing dowries in the same tone he uses to haggle over sheep. Sometimes you want to scream, "Ask me what I want!" But you bite your tongue, knowing that your own wishes are about as important to this process as the weather. Your mother tries to reassure you. She remembers what it was like waiting for her father to seal the bargain that would decide her life. She pats your hand and says, "You'll understand one day when you have daughters." You smile and nod, knowing you'll never want your daughter to feel like this, like a ledger entry waiting for someone else's signature. One day, a wealthy merchant arrives in the village. He's looking for a bride for his eldest son, and suddenly every eligible girl's mother is dusting the hearth twice as often. The market square buzzes with the news, each family quietly jockeying for position. You notice girls straightening their shoulders, speaking a little softer, parents exchanging hopeful glances. The merchant's wife, sharp-eyed and suspicious, sizes up every girl as if inspecting apples for bruises. Your father tells you to behave, to let your purity shine through in your demeanour. You wonder how anyone is supposed to do that. Maybe by blinking slowly, or smiling just so. You wish the merchant's son would care whether you like to read, or if you're afraid of thunderstorms, but you know it doesn't matter. Your worth is measured in rumours, not reality. There's a kind of comedy to it if you look sideways at the whole affair. All these adults fussing over who is pure enough for whom, while you and the other girls exchange eye rolls and secret jokes. One of your friends whispers, "Maybe we should start our own market, trade the boys for cows instead." You both giggle, but you know the stakes are too high to push your luck. The merchant's family eventually chooses another girl, one whose mother has a reputation for strictness, and whose father owns 3 fields. You're relieved, a little, and also strangely disappointed. The relief comes from knowing you won't have to leave home just yet, won't have to prove yourself to strangers who see you as nothing more than a good investment. The disappointment is hard to explain, a mix of envy and the nagging suspicion that you'll never get to choose your own fate. Your family rallies, quickly spinning the loss as a blessing. We can do better, a nobleman next perhaps. But you know the truth. Every year you remain unwed, your value drops. The older you get, the more people whisper, "Why hasn't she been chosen?" as if purity has an expiration date. You notice how differently the boys are treated. Your brothers come and go as they please, mud on their boots and wind in their hair. No one questions where they've been or who they've spoken to. Your father brags about their adventures, their cleverness, their boldness. You wish just once someone would boast about how many books you've read, or how you always remember the priest's sermons word for word. But those aren't the qualities that count. Not here, not now. Sometimes you dream of running away, of joining a band of travelling actors or hiding in the woods like a storybook outlaw. You know it's fantasy, but it's a comfort to imagine a world where purity is a joke, where people care more about laughter than legacies. But in the real world, every decision, every interaction is shaped by the pressure to remain untarnished, untouched, unsullied. On feast days, the pressure grows. You're expected to sit quietly at the family table, smile politely at any man who speaks to you, and never let your guard down. One careless laugh or a glance held too long can become the seed of gossip that blooms into scandal. The village has a long memory and a short fuse when it comes to women's reputations. A single rumour, even if it's a lie, can follow you for years. Historians still debate whether purity was ever really about virtue, or if it was just a convenient way to control women. Maybe it started as a way to ensure legitimate heirs, but over time it grew into something bigger and more burdensome. Stories circulate of women punished for nothing more than a neighbour's suspicion, or a rival's envy. Some were sent away to distant convents, others forced into hasty marriages with men nobody else wanted. The truth is often lost, buried beneath layers of shame and silence. You watch as one of your friends, a clever girl with quick hands and a sharper wit, is suddenly sent to live with distant relatives after a boy claims she smiled at him. The story shifts and twists with every telling. Sometimes she was seen walking in the orchard alone. Sometimes she was overheard humming a love song. The facts don't matter. What matters is that her purity is now suspect, and her prospects have vanished overnight. Her mother stops coming to market, her father walks with his head bowed. Everyone knows, but no one says a word. In private, you rage against the unfairness. You write secret stories in your mind where girls run their own lives, make their own choices, and purity is something you define for yourself, not something decided by strangers. But in the real world, you keep your head down, your mouth shut, and hope for the best. Sometimes, though, you catch glimpses of resistance. An old aunt who never married and seems to live just fine, thank you very much. A widow who runs her own shop and refuses to remarry, even though people talk behind her back. These women are rare and their independence is always tinged with suspicion, but they offer a sliver of hope that life doesn't always have to follow the same rules. As you get older, the conversations shift. Now the talk is about matches and offers, about who might come calling and what they'll bring with them. Cows, silver, maybe a plot of land. You listen, but the words are just noise. You wonder what your life would look like if you could choose who you love, if you could decide what matters most. But here, now, it's the economy of purity that shapes every hope, every heartbreak, every ordinary day. As the sun sets, you sit by the window, watching the world turn golden and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings, and you close your eyes, wishing for a future where your value is measured by your heart, your humour, your hidden dreams, not by the careful, silent record of your so-called purity. The chill in your bones lingers through morning, though the sun finally struggles through low clouds and spills pale gold across the village green. You'd think the daylight would burn away old superstitions and shadows, but in the medieval world, nothing is ever quite as simple as it seems, especially when it comes to the awkward, unspoken rituals that govern a girl's reputation for purity, the endless tests and trials that begin long before you ever reach a wedding bed. From the moment you become of age, which might be as young as 12 or 13, though you still feel much more like a child than anything else, your body stops belonging to you and becomes a kind of public mystery. You notice the change first in the way people look at you. Neighbours who once tousled your hair now pause, appraising you with a squint, as if they can somehow see through to the truth beneath your skin. Older women click their tongues and gossip about which girls bloom early, which mothers are too lenient, which households keep the strictest watch. Every time you bathe or dress, you're reminded that your body is not quite your own. If you show too much ankle, if your hair escapes its pins, if your dress is a fraction too snug, you're not just careless, you're inviting suspicion. Some girls cope by becoming invisible, wrapping themselves in layers and silence. Others, bold or perhaps just weary, take small risks, daring a joke or a twirl at the maypole. But you always know the rules are there, humming beneath every interaction, ready to snap shut like a trap if you misstep. Historians still argue whether these constant inspections, formal and informal, were more about genuine belief in purity or about reinforcing the social order. Was everyone truly convinced that a single mistake would mark you for life? Or did these rituals simply keep people in line, making every girl her family's responsibility, every mother her daughter's warden? Whatever the reason, the fact is that tests of purity are a part of daily life. Some are subtle. A question about where you were at dusk, a glance at your dress when you return from the well. Others are more blatant. You've heard stories of fathers or older brothers inspecting sheets, or mothers watching like hawks on feast days to ensure no boy gets too close. And sometimes, the rituals are much more public, especially for the daughters of nobility or anyone with property on the line. Take the infamous bed test. It sounds like the setup for a bad joke. 3 elders, a nervous bride, and a freshly made bed walk into a chamber. but the reality is deeply humiliating. On the morning after your wedding, you're expected to produce proof that you were untouched when you entered the marriage. This proof often takes the form of stained sheets, paraded around by cheerful relatives like a trophy. If the evidence is there, your family rejoices. If not, the whispering begins. The horror of these tests isn't just in their indignity, it's in their utter randomness. Maybe you trip and fall, scraping your knee badly enough to bleed. Maybe you're born with a body that simply doesn't follow the rules. You've heard more than one tale of a wedding night failure that led to years of misery. A girl sent home in disgrace, a marriage annulled, a dowry lost. There are even records of courts being convened to weigh the testimony of doctors, midwives and neighbours, each called upon to judge whether you were truly pure or simply unlucky. Your mother tries to prepare you, but her advice is all about appearances. Smile politely, never be alone with a boy, avoid drawing attention. She can't protect you from the more intrusive rituals, the ones that strip away not just your privacy but your dignity as well. There's a sense among the women of the village, a silent pact, that you simply have to endure, the way you endure winter's cold or a poorly baked loaf. If you're lucky, your first test will be your last. If not, the suspicions can linger for a lifetime. You hear stories of girls who failed the test, who fled in shame or were quietly shipped off to distant relatives. No one ever says what happens to them. They become ghost stories, lessons whispered in dark kitchens to frighten the next generation into obedience. Sometimes, though, the community is more forgiving, especially if a wealthy family stands to lose too much by ruining a match. Then, explanations are concocted, stories spun, reputations salvaged by a well-placed bribe or a priest's blessing. Justice, you realise, is as bendable as a green willow branch. There's another test, quieter but just as cruel. The endless judgment of strangers. Every step you take, every conversation, every smile is weighed and measured. You're told to act pure, but no one can agree on what that means. Is it walking with your eyes down, never laughing in public, refusing to dance? It's a moving target, always just out of reach. You can never relax, never truly be yourself. Your opinions, your humour, your curiosity, these are all dangerous. Better to keep them tucked away, like your best Sunday dress only brought out when it's safe. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to live in a world where people cared more about what you said than about whether your hands are calloused or your skirt is a half-inch too short. You imagine debates by candlelight, lively arguments about farming, weather, even politics. But here, your value is judged in silence, in things left unsaid and glances left unreturned. There's even a ritual for that. When you reach marriageable age, your mother sits you down for the talk. Only instead of the birds and the bees, it's a list of don'ts. Don't linger by the well. Don't walk home alone. Don't laugh too loudly. Don't look a man in the eye. Don't ever be seen alone with someone you're not related to. The rules pile up until you feel smothered by them, like a quilt on a summer night. You hear the stories about women in far-off lands, merchants' wives in Florence who own their own shops, noble women in England who write poetry and correspond with scholars. But even in those places, the tests and rituals persist, adapted to local customs but always present. Whether it's an elaborate legal document or a whispered accusation, your fate can hinge on something as simple as the colour of a sheet or the rumour of a tryst. Of course, there are those who break the rules. The bold, the desperate, the ones who decide their own lives are worth the risk. You see flashes of rebellion in the eyes of the baker's daughter, who flirts shamelessly with the blacksmith's apprentice, in the swagger of the tavern girl who knows how to handle a drunken customer, in the quiet defiance of the widow who refuses to remarry and runs her farm herself. But for every story of success, there are more of ruin, of girls who gambled and lost everything. Sometimes the rituals seem almost absurd. You hear tales of noble families who go so far as to hire testers, elderly women whose job it is to examine the bride before the wedding. You shudder at the thought, grateful your own family is too poor for such extravagance. Still, you know that if your prospects ever improve, if you catch the eye of a wealthier suitor, you might not be so lucky. Historians still debate whether these practices were truly universal, or if they were more common among the rich than the poor. Some point to records of rural weddings where no one cared much about anything but the harvest. Others insist that even the humblest peasant wanted to know his wife was pure. The truth is probably somewhere in between, as tangled and contradictory as everything else about life in this era. You cope as best you can. You practice answering questions with a shrug and a shy smile. You learn to make yourself small to avoid standing out. You find comfort in the company of other girls, in whispered jokes and secret glances. Together you mock the absurdity of the tests, inventing wild stories about girls who outsmarted their elders and got away with murder. Figuratively, of course. Laughter becomes your shield, your tiny rebellion against a world that refuses to see you as anything more than a prize to be won or lost. You learn to value the moments of privacy, late at night when everyone else is asleep, or early in the morning when you sneak outside and breathe in the cold air. You savour the freedom of those moments, knowing they are fleeting. In those quiet hours, you let yourself imagine a different life, one where you aren't tested or judged, where you can speak your mind without fear. But reality always returns. The tests await, the rituals continue, the scrutiny never ends. You endure because you have no other choice. And maybe, just maybe, you hope that someday things will change, that the world will learn to value women for more than their so-called purity. Until then, you survive, one awkward ritual at a time. Some evenings, after another day of tiptoeing around suspicion, you sneak away to the edge of the village, where the river winds between tall reeds and the air smells of moss and wild mint. You sit there, toes dipping in the water, watching the sky turn lavender. For a moment you feel like yourself, a girl with a heart, a mind, a story all your own. Then you hear your name called, sharp and worried, and you rise, smoothing your dress, ready to step back into the role the world has written for you. As you walk home, you pass other girls doing the same, living quiet rebellions, surviving the endless tests, dreaming of a world where purity isn't the only thing that matters. You wonder what they dream about, if they ever imagine the rules breaking, the rituals ending, the dawn finally bright and unburdened. The day dawns damp and grey and you wake already tense, aware that your best chance for safety, your family's hopes, even your very survival, lies not in anything you say or do, but in your willingness to keep your mouth shut. Silence is your armour. The truth is, you learned to wear it before you ever really knew why. As a girl, you might have been praised for curiosity, a clever turn of phrase, a funny story at supper, a question about why the sun sets so late in summer. But as you grow, you realise the rules are changing. Where once your father smiled at your wit, now he frowns, exchanging worried looks with your mother. Best not to draw attention, she warns. People talk. And when people talk, the world can shrink to a single word, impure, whispered behind hands. You watch your brothers, noisy and oblivious, trailing muddy footprints into the house, arguing over who stole the last apple. Their loud voices bounce off the walls. No one tells them to hush or asks, "What will the neighbours think?" But you, if you laugh too loud at the feast, if you question why only boys get to stay up late, if you're caught listening in on the men's stories, you're gently, then firmly, told to be quiet. It's for your own good, they say. It keeps you desirable, the polite word for marketable. Historians still argue whether the cult of silence among medieval women was a conscious act of self-preservation, or just the most effective strategy available in a society built to mistrust female voices. Maybe it's both. You see the calculations in every glance your mother gives you, every time you start to say something, then swallow the words. You understand too that the stakes aren't just your own happiness, but the future of everyone you love. If you're accused of immodesty, if your purity is doubted, the consequences ripple outward. Your father's honour, your sister's chance at a good marriage, your family's place in the village. And so you learn the art of speaking without speaking. Your smile becomes your answer to most questions, a gentle nod, a safe agreement. In church, you bow your head and murmur prayers in unison, never adding your own thoughts, never risking a bold opinion. At home, you let others talk first, echoing what's safest. The less you say, the more likely you are to be called good, humble, obedient. They're all words that really mean one thing: silent. Sometimes, at night, you whisper your secrets into your pillow. You imagine a world where you can say anything, where no one weighs your words against your worth as a bride. But daylight returns, and you slip back into the practiced quiet, every word measured, every joke carefully edited. You become a master of unspoken thoughts, of carefully arranged silences, of letting the world guess rather than know. Yet the irony is, silence itself draws suspicion. Say nothing, and people wonder what you're hiding. Speak up, and you risk being seen as brazen or foolish. It's a tightrope. Too much silence and you're strange, too little and you're immodest. You find yourself walking that line every day, learning when to fade into the background and when to offer just enough words to pass as normal. It's exhausting, this constant act. At gatherings, you watch as men debate taxes, harvests, the king's latest folly. You know you could offer something, an observation, a clever solution, but you swallow it down. Even among other women, conversations are careful, bounded by what's safe to say. You share recipes, not dreams, prayers, not complaints. Any hint of ambition or desire must be disguised as concern for others. I hope my brother's new wife is kind, you say, instead of admitting your longing for a life that's more than waiting and wondering. Sometimes you catch sight of older women, mothers, aunts, even the village healer, whose faces are set in lines of resignation. You wonder what dreams they sacrificed for safety, what arguments they never dared to make. Did they ever imagine standing up at the feast and saying what they really thought? Or was silence always the rule, handed down like a recipe for bread? You notice too that the women who do speak out are often punished, not always openly, but with subtle exclusion. The clever girl who argued with the priest is left off invitation lists. The widow who runs her own business is called difficult. The message is clear. Silence keeps you part of the group, while words set you apart, sometimes dangerously so. In rare moments, though, you glimpse resistance. The sly look your mother gives you when someone makes a ridiculous claim. The barely hidden smile between friends when a pompous uncle pontificates on the nature of women. In these moments, you realize silence can be its own language, a shared joke, a silent rebellion. A raised eyebrow, a careful cough, a long pause before answering, these are the tools you use to signal to each other to say what cannot be said. Even so, you long for more. You remember a story from a visiting monk about a queen who advised her husband in secret. Her words carried in whispers behind thick curtains. You wonder how many women have shaped the world through silence, changing history not by shouting but by careful suggestion, by knowing exactly when to say just enough and when to say nothing at all. You keep a secret ledger in your mind of all the things you'd say if you could. Clever retorts, questions about the stars, ideas for how to make the bread rise better, stories about dreams you barely admit even to yourself. Some days, you rehearse them quietly as you sweep the hearth or wash dishes in the cold stream. You let yourself imagine a world where those words would be worth something, where your voice would be greeted with respect instead of worry. There's a moment at every feast when the conversation lulls and everyone turns to look at you. It's your cue to smile, to nod, to ask a harmless question about the weather or the crops. You play the part so well that sometimes you forget who you really are beneath the mask. But when you're alone, you practice your real voice. Soft at first, then stronger, like a song you half remember from childhood. Still, you see the dangers everywhere. A neighbour girl who joked too loudly at the spring fair finds herself whispered about for weeks. Not modest, the women say. Her father should keep a closer watch. Another, clever and pretty, is suddenly married off to a distant cousin after someone overhears her questioning why women can't inherit land. You realise that every word you speak is a risk, a roll of the dice with consequences for your entire family. Historians debate how widespread these punishments for speaking out really were. In some places, women could run businesses, even act as legal witnesses. In others, their voices were barely tolerated in church. But everywhere, silence was a form of safety, a way to avoid the harsh spotlight of suspicion. You notice the pressure most acutely in the small private spaces of daily life, in the careful way your mother chooses her words with your father, in the way older women look away when men talk politics. Even your laughter is measured. A giggle with friends is allowed, but real, unrestrained laughter, joy that spills over, is suspicious. If you can't control yourself, what else might you do? Despite the constant watchfulness, you find ways to share your real self. In the kitchen, as you knead bread alongside your sisters, you swap stories in low voices. You tell jokes that only make sense to women, the punchlines hidden in glances and gestures. Sometimes in the garden, you and your friends dare to dream aloud, just for a moment, about what you'd do if you had power or freedom, or even just the chance to make your own choices. These moments are fleeting, but they keep you sane. As the day ends, you sit by the window watching dusk settle over the fields. You think about all the things you didn't say, all the opinions you buried for the sake of safety. You wonder if, someday, there will be a reckoning, a day when women's voices rise up, when silence is no longer the measure of worth. Until then, you keep your secrets close, holding tight to your dreams and your quiet rebellions. Sometimes, late at night, you whisper to yourself, "I am more than my silence. I am more than the sum of the words I never speak." And somewhere, deep inside, you believe that's true, even if the world isn't ready to hear it yet. You wake to church bells, that somber toll echoing through mist and moss, and you know what day it is by the heaviness in your mother's voice. It's visiting day, the day you walk, arms full of carefully wrapped bread and small cheeses, toward the convent on the edge of town. Most villages have one, a spired grey stone world set apart, half fortress, half prison, and sometimes both. In this age, when purity isn't just a hope but a household asset, the convent offers the surest lock of all. You're not the only one on the road this morning. There's a line of mothers and daughters, some quiet, others whispering last words or final reassurances. At the edge of the orchard, an old aunt stands watch, nodding grimly as girls pass. You know some are here by choice, a cousin maybe, who says she wanted a life with books and silence, a life safe from the bargaining table and the wedding bed. But most are here because someone else decided the best way to protect their purity was to shut it away behind stone walls and holy vows. Historians still argue whether these convents were truly sanctuaries or clever cages. There are letters and legends describing learned abbesses and nuns who wielded influence, who managed lands, dispensed charity, and even whispered advice to local nobles. But for every story of a powerful holy woman, there are a dozen more about girls who arrived in tears, left behind by families unwilling or unable to risk their future value in the market of marriage. You walk through the great wooden doors, the hinges sighing with the weight of centuries. The air inside the convent is cool and still, scented with candle wax and distant gardens. A group of nuns kneel in the chapel, their voices braided together in slow, sad song. For a moment it feels peaceful, almost a relief. No one here will judge you for your laugh, your walk, or your dreams. But there's another kind of silence inside these walls, deeper and heavier than any you've known at home. You find your cousin in the garden, her hands stained with earth, her face paler than you remember. She smiles, but her eyes flick away toward the abbess, watching from the shade. You ask if she's happy, and she shrugs, a small tired gesture, as if happiness is a word from another language, only half remembered. She tells you about the daily routine: prayer, study, work, more prayer. There are books, yes, and lessons in Latin, but there's no freedom. You cannot leave the grounds without permission, and visitors are closely watched. You realise that, for all its safety, the convent is less a haven than a holding cell. It's not just the girls from poor families who end up here. Wealthy houses send spare daughters, girls for whom there was no suitable match, or those who attracted unwanted attention. Sometimes, a girl is sent away for a scandal no one will name, a rumour that lingers like a cold. Other times, she's simply in the way, a mouth too many to feed, or a personality too bright for a household built on shadows. The cloister absorbs them all, asking only for vows of silence and obedience in return. Your own mother looks nervous every time you pass the convent gates. She knows the danger. One slip, one mistake, and this could be your home too. She warns you, gently but firmly, to mind yourself. You know she means it in love, but it feels like another brick in the wall between you and the life you might have had. Sometimes you hear whispers about the other side of cloistered life, about secret lovers, hidden letters, girls who climb walls under the cover of night. Historians debate whether these tales are fact or fiction, but you know enough to believe a little of both. Wherever people are locked away, rebellion grows in the cracks, but even the boldest escape is only temporary. For most, the convent is a final answer, a closing of doors and a quieting of dreams. The prayers in the chapel are meant to be comforting, but to you they sound like surrender. Each chant is a letting go, of youth, of hope, of the wild, bright future you once imagined. You watch the nuns move in their silent processions and wonder how many still remember the world outside, the feel of grass beneath bare feet, the sound of their own laughter. You notice that the oldest nuns, the ones who have lived longest in the shadows, have a kind of peace. They no longer yearn for what they cannot have. They have folded their longing into the rhythms of bells and candles. You wonder if you could ever do the same. In rare moments, the convent becomes a place of real learning. Some abbesses encourage reading, even writing. There are stories of secret poems, of coded messages hidden in embroidery, of women who found ways to leave their mark on the world from behind high walls. But these are the exceptions, the legends whispered between the pages of prayer books. Most days the rules are clear: humility, modesty, obedience, and the constant reminder that your body and your purity are not your own but God's. You ask your cousin if she's lonely. She thinks for a long time, then answers, "Not so much lonely as small, like I'm a shadow of myself." You wonder if the walls make the person, or if the world simply builds walls wherever a girl tries to become more than her role. You don't say this out loud. It's the sort of thought that gets girls sent to the abbess's office, and you've seen enough of those faces. Solemn, stern, not unkind, but unyielding. As you leave, you see new girls arriving, some crying, some blank-faced, some clutching little trinkets from home, a ribbon, a shell, a broken doll. Each carries a story, a dream, a life interrupted. You want to tell them to run, to hide, to demand something more. But you know there's nowhere else to go. In this world, a girl's purity is safer behind stone than in a village full of eyes. Outside, you breathe deeply, letting the cold air fill your lungs. For a moment you're glad to be free, even if that freedom is only the freedom to walk home, to play your part in the village's endless drama. You think about your cousin as you cross the fields. You wonder what she'll be like in 10 years, whether she'll still remember your name, or whether the silence of the cloister will have claimed her entirely. Some nights you lie awake and try to imagine a world without convents, a world where girls who read, who speak, who laugh and run and make mistakes aren't locked away for their own protection. You imagine abbesses opening the gates, nuns streaming into the fields, bells ringing for joy instead of resignation. You wonder what your mother would have done if she'd been born in that world. Would she have chosen the convent, or would she have run wild through the hills, her hair streaming behind her in the wind? You see how the convent casts its shadow over every family, every conversation. Even the threat of it is enough to make most girls behave, to keep secrets, to accept silence and careful living. The promise of safety is tempting, but you know the price. Freedom is traded for peace, dreams for certainty, the wide world for a cell, however gilded. Still, you hope. You hope that one day the world will be brave enough to let girls grow wild, to value their laughter, their ideas, their dreams more than their purity. Until then, You walk the line between obedience and hope, silence and longing, the world as it is and the world as it might be. As you reach your door, the bells ring out again, softer now, fading into the dusk. You close your eyes, letting their echoes settle in your bones, a reminder that, even behind the thickest walls, a part of you will always remain free. The convent bells echo in your ears even after you leave, their heavy solemn notes following you through the village lanes and across muddy fields. By the time you're home, the sun has climbed above the rooftops and the air is thick with the smells of bread baking and wood smoke curling from a dozen crooked chimneys. You settle into your chores, kneading dough, feeding chickens, listening to the drone of daily life. But your mind drifts, as it so often does, to the stories you've heard and the ones you've only imagined. In every corner of the medieval world, you find yourself surrounded by tales of legendary women, saints, martyrs, and heroines whose names are carved in church stones or whispered from pulpits. But as you listen closer, you realise there's a strange sameness to them all. The women who are praised, who become examples for you and every girl you know, are rarely celebrated for their wit or wisdom, their courage or cleverness. It's always the same lesson, written in the lines of old prayers and painted in faded colours on the chapel walls. The saints are praised for their purity, their silence, their willingness to suffer, to say no, to bleed and pray and vanish into the background while men write the stories. You remember sitting as a child in the back pew of the village church, legs swinging restlessly, trying to focus while the priest droned on. He'd tell the story of St. Agnes, the girl who would rather die than let anyone touch her, or St. Cecilia, who kept her vow of purity even when it cost her everything. You're told these stories are models, reminders of what it means to be good, to be holy. The message is as clear as the morning bell. Better to disappear in the name of purity than to make a mark in the world as anything else. The stories are everywhere. You hear them at feast days, at funerals, in the whispered comfort mothers offer daughters on dark nights. You learn about the miracle of a girl whose hair turned to iron to protect her from attackers, or a princess whose prayers summoned walls of fire between herself and the world. If only, you think, it were really that easy to defend your own boundaries. But in reality, you rely not on miracles, but on careful silence, on behaving just well enough to be safe, but never so boldly that people notice. Historians still debate whether these saints and legends shaped society's values, or simply reflected them. Was purity always the ideal, or did these stories make it so? Maybe it's both. The myths feed the rules, and the rules feed the myths, until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Sometimes, though, you catch a glimpse of something different. Stories of clever women who succeed not just by being pure, but by outsmarting those around them. You hear in secret about queens who ruled from behind the throne, about healers who used their knowledge to save lives, about nuns who wrote poems and ran estates. These stories are rarely told in public, and when they are, it's always with a warning. She was clever, yes, but she was also chaste. The lesson is clear. Purity must come first, or nothing else matters. You wonder how many stories have been lost because they didn't fit this mould. How many women dreamed of more, tried to do more, but disappeared from history because they failed the test of purity. You think of your cousin at the convent, her hunger for books, her sharp questions. Will anyone remember her mind, or only her vow? There's another kind of legend too, the cautionary tales. Stories of women who failed, who were too bold, too curious, too alive. Eve, of course, the original example. Her name invoked whenever a girl is too clever for her own good. Then there are the local stories. The miller's daughter who ran off with a peddler, the wise woman accused of witchcraft, the girl whose laugh was just a little too loud at the midsummer fair. Their endings are always unhappy, a warning to the rest of you. Don't stand out, don't ask questions, don't risk your place in the world for the sake of your own desires. You begin to see the world as a tapestry of warnings and wishes, every thread stitched with the promise of safety if only you are quiet enough, good enough, pure enough. It's a beautiful pattern from a distance. But the closer you look, the more you see the places where the threads are fraying, where other stories are trying to push through. In the quiet hours before bed, you imagine what it would be like to be remembered for something besides your purity. You imagine your name sung in songs, not for your silence, but for your ideas, your laughter, your courage in the face of fear. Sometimes you dream of being a saint, not the kind who dies for refusing a man, but the kind who lives boldly, who leads armies or writes books or changes the world. Of course, you keep these dreams secret. In public, you play your part, repeating the stories you're supposed to tell. St. Agnes was so brave, you say, even as you wonder what she might have become if anyone had listened to her voice instead of praising her refusal. You smile at the painted faces in the chapel, their halos golden, their eyes always turned to heaven, and you wonder what they'd think of you, of your doubts, your stubborn hope, your longing to be more than a story of lost innocence. Sometimes in the market you hear men joke about saints and martyrs, their laughter tinged with something sharp. If only women today were as quiet as St. Cecilia, they say, or no girl will ever match St. Lucy. The women nearby smile and nod, but you can see the flicker of something else in their eyes, a mixture of envy and rebellion. You know you're not alone in your longing. Even in this world built on silence and purity, you find echoes of other hopes, other dreams. You notice too that every girl in your circle has a favourite saint, a story she clings to in the dark, a hope that maybe, just maybe, she can find a place for herself. Some choose the quiet ones, the martyrs who never spoke a word. Others choose the clever ones, the women who navigated the dangers of court and convent with wit and patience. You listen to their stories, and you see the tension in every telling, the desire to be good, to be safe, to be remembered, and the equally strong desire to be known, to be loved for more than a single quality. Historians still argue about the real lives behind the legends. Was Joan of Arc a pure martyr or a military genius, a saint or a rebel? Was Hildegard of Bingen a visionary or a troublemaker, a holy woman or a scholar ahead of her time? The truth, you realise, is that every story is shaped by the teller, and every legend is a mixture of hope and warning, of possibility and fear. On festival days, you see the way stories shape lives. The girls wear flower crowns and walk in procession, their eyes lowered, their smiles careful. They sing hymns to the Virgin Mary, whose image floats above them, perfect, untouchable, silent. You can feel the weight of expectation in every step, the pressure to live up to a model that no one can truly match. You wonder if the Virgin herself ever longed for something more, if she ever wished to step down from her pedestal and walk among the rest of you, laughing and weeping and speaking her mind. In rare moments you find places where the old stories begin to crack. A young priest fresh from the city reads poetry by a female mystic and shares it from the pulpit, his voice shaking as if he knows he's breaking a rule. An old woman tells a tale of a healer who saved a village from plague, her purity never mentioned, her wisdom celebrated for once. You cling to these moments, savouring them like the last slice of honey cake at harvest. You see too that some women find ways to make the system work for them. An abbess who runs her convent with a shrewd hand, trading prayers for favours, influencing local politics. A merchant's wife who negotiates deals in her husband's name, her reputation protected by her goodness. Even the girls who marry well, who manage their households with quiet authority, find a kind of power in playing the part of the pure silent saint. But you know these victories are always fragile, always dependent on staying within the lines drawn by others. In the evenings, as you help your mother wind wool or set bread to rise, you share your secret thoughts in hints and whispers. I wonder if St. Catherine ever got tired of spinning, you say, and your mother smiles, a small secret smile that says she wonders too. You see in her eyes a glimmer of the girl she once was, the one who dreamed of more than this, who maybe even tried to reach beyond what was allowed. As you lay your head down to sleep, you repeat the stories you've learned, the ones you're supposed to believe. But in your dreams, you rewrite them. You become the heroine who doesn't disappear, the saint who laughs, the legend who lives for more than her purity. You wake with the sun and the stories still in your heart, a quiet promise that one day the world will remember you for all that you are, not just the parts that are easy to praise. The night air is thick with stories. They drift in through cracks in the shutters and swirl above the hearth. Tales of clever girls and unfortunate girls, of pure maidens and sly witches, of those who vanished and those who were banished. You sit with your sisters on the kitchen floor peeling turnips for stew, while your grandmother tells another story, her voice low and serious, her eyes fixed somewhere beyond the flickering candlelight. Too pretty is a problem, she says, shaking her head. And too clever is worse. You know this already. You've heard it all your life. To be pure is safe, but too much of anything, beauty, brains, even luck, puts you in danger. It's as if the world is always looking for a reason to doubt, a reason to say, she's not one of us. She's a troublemaker, maybe even a witch. You laugh softly, but not too loudly, because you know laughter, especially from a girl who draws attention, can be suspicious. In the hush of the fire, you remember the whispers from market day, how a neighbour's daughter with thick golden hair was called unnatural when boys noticed her too much, or how the old midwife with sharp eyes was accused of casting spells when her herbal cures worked too well. Sometimes it seems you can't win. If you're too quiet, you're hiding something. If you're too bold, you're up to no good. The truth is, everyone fears what they don't control, and a girl who doesn't fit, who's too pure or too peculiar, too silent or too skilled, she becomes the centre of the village's worries. You sense it most keenly at night, when the wind moans down the lane and the shadows stretch long across the fields. The world feels smaller then, as if anything out of place might tip the balance and invite misfortune. Historians still argue whether the witch hunts of the late Middle Ages were really about religion, or if they were just a way to police women who didn't follow the rules. Some say the rise in trials was about power, others blame bad harvests, plagues, or the endless wars that made everyone desperate for someone to blame. But you know that, at the heart of it, it was fear. Fear of women who were different. Women who couldn't be neatly married off or safely ignored. The signs of suspicion are everywhere. You see them in the way neighbours cross themselves when a girl with unbraided hair walks by, in the way the priest's eyes linger on the girls who come to church alone. You see it in the stories about the miller's daughter who was so untouched, she never spoke to a boy, but still ended up accused of enchanting the harvest. Or in the legend of the blacksmith's wife, who was clever enough to keep accounts and manage the forge but was driven out of town when the cows started dying. You realise that purity itself is sometimes a curse. If you're too pure, too separate from the messiness of life, people wonder why. Are you holy, or are you hiding something darker? It's as if there's no safe way to exist, not as a girl who tries to blend in, nor as one who dares to stand out. Your very existence becomes a question no one wants answered. You remember the first time someone called you different. You were younger, your hair unbound, running faster than the boys at the spring festival. The baker's wife pulled you aside, her voice low. "Slow down," she warned, "or people will talk." You didn't understand then, but now you do. Talk is dangerous. Talk can twist a life into something unrecognisable, can turn an ordinary girl into a story whispered at night. At harvest time, the air is alive with tension. The fields must yield, the stores must be filled, and anything that goes wrong, too much rain, not enough sun, can quickly be blamed on whoever stands out. You help your mother gather beans, your hands roar from the vines and hear the anxious voices around you. That girl's too lucky. Her crops never fail. That one's been talking to the woodsman after dusk. The smallest thing, a song sung off key, a dress too bright, can spark suspicion. You hear the old stories about tests for witches and pure maidens alike. Some say you can tell a witch by her shadow, others by her laugh. If a girl floats when thrown into water, she's guilty. If she sinks, she's innocent but dead. You learn early that logic doesn't matter, only what people believe. And in the world you live in, belief is often just another word for fear. Sometimes you play with the idea of magic. Just to make your sisters laugh, you wave a broom and pretend to cast a spell, but you know to keep it private, because even the hint of witchcraft is enough to draw attention you don't want. You notice that the most careful women in the village are the ones who know herbs, who deliver babies, who tend the sick. Their knowledge is a double-edged sword, needed but never truly trusted. You wonder if there's any way to win. If you're pure, you're valuable, but only as long as no one doubts your motives. If you're clever, you're useful, until you know too much. You watch as the lines are drawn tighter, as the world grows smaller and more suspicious every year. You see how quickly love can turn to fear, how easily admiration becomes accusation. You keep your head down, hoping not to attract attention, but inside you rage at the injustice. You want to shout to tell everyone that the witch hunts aren't about evil at all. They're about control, about making sure every girl knows her place, about punishing those who don't fit. You know better than to say it aloud. So you stew in silence, clinging to small acts of rebellion, a hidden book, a joke whispered at midnight, a secret hope that things will change. The church teaches that purity is next to godliness, but you notice it's women who bear the brunt of that teaching. You see the double standard in every sermon, every confession, every prayer for protection against temptation. Men are rarely accused of leading the village astray. It's always women, too bold, too quiet, too clever, too pretty. You talk about this with your friends in hushed voices, safe behind closed doors. You share stories of other villages, other girls, other injustices. Sometimes the stories make you laugh. A girl who tricked the priest by pretending to see visions, a woman who sold magic charms that were nothing more than river stones. But beneath the laughter is fear. You know how quickly a joke can become a crime, how quickly a rumour can ruin a life. Historians still argue about the true nature of witch hunts and purity trials. Some say they were driven by economics, a way to seize property, to eliminate rivals, to keep women in their place. Others blame superstition, or the chaos of a world always on the brink of disaster. Whatever the reason, you know the effect. A world where every girl is always a little afraid, always wondering what she might be accused of next. In your village the memories linger. The field where a girl was last seen, the well where another was found, the old tree at the edge of the woods. Every place has a story, a warning. You grow up with the knowledge that purity is both shield and target, that no one is ever really safe. And yet, you persist. You find ways to survive, to laugh, to dream. You braid your hair and tend the fire. You help your sisters learn the rules. You whisper to the night your hopes for something more. You know that for now you must be careful, must balance the appearance of purity with the need to stay unnoticed. Some nights you lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind. You imagine what it would be like to live without fear, to walk in the daylight unafraid of what people might say. You wonder if such a world is possible, if girls will ever be free to be clever and pretty and pure all at once, without risking everything. As dawn approaches, you rise and begin another day. You move through your chores with care, your smile practiced, your words measured. But in your heart, you keep the stories alive, the stories of women who survived, who outlasted the suspicion, who lived in spite of the fear. You tell yourself that you too can endure, that one day perhaps the world will judge you by more than your purity, your silence, or your ability to blend in. One day maybe being different won't be dangerous. Until then, you walk the line, never too much, never too little, always just enough to survive. The air in the house is thick with the anticipation of your sister's wedding day, a sense of waiting so dense you feel you could slice it with your mother's best kitchen knife. The tables are scrubbed, bread is rising on the hearth, and outside the window neighbours hang garlands and string ribbons from the fence posts. Even your father, usually so gruff and distracted, moves quietly, his face set in a solemn mask. Everyone knows what this day is truly about. There is a performance ahead, and the stakes are far higher than the sweetness of the cake or the sharpness of the wine. Your sister, pale beneath her wreath of flowers, sits at the edge of her narrow bed, hands twisted in her lap. You remember playing games with her in the fields, chasing crows and tumbling in the grass, both of you loud and free before you learned to keep your voices soft. Now she is a bride, and her value is about to be measured in front of half the village, not by her kindness, not by her skills, but by a thin piece of linen and the dark stain that everyone waits for. You help her dress in silence. Your mother's hands tremble a little as she laces up the bodice, fussing with the ties and smoothing imaginary wrinkles from the skirt. "Remember to smile," she whispers, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. You wonder who she's crying for, your sister herself, or every woman who has ever walked into this day knowing what is expected and dreading the public proof to come. Historians still argue whether these wedding night rituals truly reflected the values of the entire medieval world, or if they were a performance designed to keep everyone in line. Maybe they started as a way to settle questions about inheritance and alliances, but over time the ritual took on a life of its own. In some places the entire village demands to see the sheets. In others, only a handful of trusted women bear witness. Either way, there is no privacy, no room for fear, pain, or confusion. Only the relentless need to demonstrate that your family's honour remains intact. You slip downstairs as the procession forms. The church bells clang, and neighbours file into pews, faces shining with anticipation. The priest waits at the altar, hands folded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You hear whispers behind you. "She's a good girl, always quiet. Her mother raised her well." The words are both blessing and burden, a reminder of the performance ahead. The ceremony passes in a blur of vows and candlelight, a rustle of silk and velvet, a flurry of prayers spoken more out of fear than faith. You barely remember the words. Your mind is on what comes next. The feast, the toasts, the endless glances toward the newlyweds as if everyone is counting the minutes. As night falls, the celebration spills from the great hall into the lanes. Laughter rises, songs drift under the stars, but you sense the tension building, a kind of collective holding of breath. Eventually someone signals that it's time. You watch as your sister is led away by a clutch of older women, your mother, 2 aunts, and the midwife, who has seen this ritual more times than anyone can count. You want to run after her, to protect her, but you know this is a journey every woman must take alone. In the bride chamber, the air is heavy with the scent of lavender and fear. The older women murmur instructions, smoothing the sheets, placing bowls of water by the bed, offering gentle advice that sounds more like warnings. Your sister's eyes are wide, her mouth set in a determined line. You think of all the stories you've heard, the jokes traded in secret, the real stories whispered late at night when the grown-ups thought you were asleep. The groom arrives, his steps slow and nervous. He glances at your sister, then at the women, and you realise that he too is part of the ritual, expected to perform a role he barely understands. The door closes. The room falls silent. In the hall outside, the rest of the village waits, the party subdued, voices low. There is a strange intimacy in this moment, a vulnerability so deep it almost feels holy. But the holiness is lost beneath the weight of expectation, the knowledge that what matters most is not love or kindness or even happiness, but a stain on white linen. You wish, more than anything, that you could take your sister's place, shield her from what's coming, offer her the freedom to define herself by something other than this one moment. Somewhere deep in the night the door opens. The midwife emerges holding the sheet aloft, a crude banner, proof of your sister's worth. The crowd outside erupts in cheers and laughter, relief pouring through the house like wine. Your father stands taller. Your mother weeps openly, clutching the sheet as if it is the most precious thing in the world. Your sister is praised, her name on everyone's lips, her future secure, for now. But what if there is no stain, What if the proof the world demands is not delivered? You've heard those stories too. The hush that falls, the cold looks, the whispering that never ends. In some families, the blame falls on the girl. In others, on the boy. Accusations are made, alliances threatened, marriages annulled. Sometimes the midwife helps the process along, pricking a finger or offering a bit of chicken blood. Everyone knows the truth, but no one dares speak it. The ritual must be satisfied, even if it's a lie. Historians debate how often these scenes really played out, whether most families truly believed in the necessity of proof, or whether it was just a theatre of control. But for you, the reality is the same. A life defined by what cannot be seen, by what must be proven in the most public, humiliating way. In the aftermath, your sister sits quietly, wrapped in a blanket, her face unreadable. You bring her tea, sit by her side, and whisper the words you wish someone had said to you. You are more than this. You always were. She nods, a tear slipping down her cheek, but you know it will take time for her to believe it. The next day, the village returns to normal. The gossip shifts to other topics: the harvest, the weather, a neighbour's new calf. But you feel changed, as if you have seen the world's machinery exposed. You understand, now more than ever, how thin the line is between honour and shame, how little it takes to fall from grace. As you walk through the market, women greet you with knowing smiles, men nod approvingly. Everyone is relieved that the ritual is complete, that the village's fragile peace is preserved. But beneath the surface, you sense the anxiety that never truly fades. Every woman here remembers her own wedding night, her own test, her own fear. Every girl knows that one day it will be her turn. You notice that the boys too are changed by the ritual. They learn to see themselves as judges, their worth tied to the performance of the night. Some are kind, others cruel, but all are trapped by the same expectations, forced to play roles they did not choose, to carry burdens no one ever asked if they wanted. You begin to question what it all means. Why does a single moment hold such power? Why does the world need proof of something so private, so personal? You wonder if there is a way to change the ritual, to make it kinder, to let love and trust matter more than a stain on a sheet. Sometimes, in the quiet of evening, you imagine another kind of wedding, one without proof or witnesses, one where a girl is valued for her laughter, her wisdom, her strength. You dream of a world where love is enough, where the rituals are rewritten, where your worth is never again measured by what you cannot control. But for now, you do what every woman before you has done. You survive, you endure, you find ways to support each other. You share stories in whispers, offer comfort in the darkness, hold tight to the hope that one day the world will change, and in your heart you know that you are not alone. Across fields and forests, in every village and city, women are living the same story. Quietly defiant, quietly brave, quietly dreaming of a future where rituals are not cages but celebrations of all that you truly are. The days after your sister's wedding slip by in a daze of routine. The feasting ends, the garlands wilt, and the talk in the market gradually moves on to other things. Who has planted their turnips too early? Which sheep have gone missing? And which girls might be next in line for marriage? But for you, something is different. It's as if you've seen the inner workings of a machine that everyone pretends not to notice, a complicated clockwork of alliances, secrets, and silent trades. You notice more sharply now how conversations among adults always come back to the question of value. Who will marry whom? What dowry is expected? Whose reputation has a stain? And whose is still clean? But beneath the polite words and friendly gossip, you begin to understand that a girl's purity is not just a family matter. It is, in the eyes of the world, a commodity, a thing to be weighed, measured, and above all, priced. In your house, money is tight. You're not poor, but you're not rich either. Every extra coin matters, and every mouth to feed is a calculation. So when your father receives a letter from a distant cousin in the city, a cousin with a son of marriageable age, there's an excitement in the air that has nothing to do with love or companionship. It's all about the value of the match, the number of cows that might change hands, the plot of land that could be added to the family's holdings. You're reminded daily that a girl's worth, in this economy, is set not by her wit or her work, but by her purity. If you can be presented as unblemished, quiet, obedient, and above all untouched, you might just tip the scales in your family's favour. If not, you might find yourself bargained off to someone with fewer prospects, or even sent to a convent, a living marker of lost opportunity. You watch as your parents plan and scheme, the language of trade slipping into every conversation. Your father boasts about your good behaviour, your mother fusses over your clothes and your manners. You must make a good impression, she whispers, as if your life is a never-ending audition. The entire process feels like a market, and you the most precious item for sale. Historians still argue how much this market value mentality shaped marriages and lives in medieval villages and cities. Some suggest it was less about love than about building alliances, protecting property, and ensuring future generations. In the world you inhabit, the reality is unavoidable. Marriage is an exchange, and purity is its currency. You walk through the village square past merchants hawking apples and cheese, and see the subtle signals that mark out which girls are still available. A new ribbon, a clean apron, hair plaited just so. All speak to your status, your readiness to be inspected and chosen. Even the way you carry yourself is part of the price. Not too bold, not too meek, just enough to signal that you're a safe investment. Your friend Anna is not so lucky. A rumour, just a whisper, about a stolen kiss behind the granary is enough to lower her value. Her mother stops speaking to yours, and her name is left off invitation lists. Anna herself becomes a ghost in the marketplace, head down, avoiding the eyes of anyone who might remember the story. It's a reminder to everyone, once your value slips, there's almost no way to recover it. In wealthier households, you hear stories of actual auctions, noblemen hosting grand parties where daughters are displayed, dressed in silk and lace, while fathers bargain over dowries and lands. Even among the poor, the spirit of the auction is alive. A good match is worth celebrating, a poor one is cause for mourning. Sometimes in quiet corners the women joke about their own price tags. "If only I were a cow," your aunt says, "at least then I'd know what I'm worth." You all laugh, but the laughter is sharp, edged with resignation. You wonder what it would feel like to have value for something you've chosen, rather than something that was chosen for you. The dowry negotiations begin in earnest when your father writes back to the cousin. The messages go back and forth for weeks. What will you bring to the marriage? What can they offer in return? The conversation is never about what you want or what the boy wants. It is a bargaining session, pure and simple. Your mother tries to comfort you, says it's for your own good. "We want you to be safe, to have a good home," she insists. But you can see the worry in her eyes, worry about making the right deal, about keeping up appearances, about what might happen if a better offer never comes. You wonder, as the days stretch into weeks, whether your worth would be different if you lived in another time, another place. Would you be allowed to work, to earn your own living, to choose your own path? Or would you always be at the mercy of someone else's calculation, your value measured by what you have not done rather than what you have accomplished? Historians debate whether dowries were truly empowering for women, giving them some control over their own fortunes, or whether they simply reinforced the idea that women were property, bought and sold for the good of the family. In your world, you know, the truth is a mix of both. A generous dowry can give a woman more security, but it never lets her forget the price that was paid. When the cousin's son finally arrives in the village, there is a flurry of preparation. You're introduced, paraded before his family like the finest goose at Michaelmas. You're instructed to smile, to speak softly, to show your skills at embroidery and music. Every word, every gesture is weighed and judged. The boy is pleasant enough, but you can tell he's as nervous as you are. You wonder if he feels like a prize too, or if he's simply going through the motions of a role he never chose. The negotiations stretch on for days. There are dinners, meetings, whispered conversations in the corner. You catch snatches of talk. She'll bring 5 cows. His father can spare a field by the river. Her reputation is spotless. You are present but not included, your life decided in the language of trade. When the agreement is finally reached, there is relief on all sides. Your mother embraces you, tears in her eyes, and tells you that you are lucky. You try to feel lucky, but all you feel is tired. You wonder what the future will bring, what it will feel like to leave your home for a new family, a new life, and a new set of expectations. The wedding comes quickly. There is music and laughter, food and drink. But you are distracted by the knowledge that everything has a price. The gifts, the celebration, the very bed you will sleep in, they are all part of the bargain. After the ceremony, as you sit quietly in your new home, you think about Anna and the girls who did not make a good match. You think about your value and whether it will change now that you are married. Will you be worth more or less? Will you ever be valued for who you are or only for what you represent? In the days that follow, you learn the rhythms of your new life. Your mother-in-law teaches you the household routines. Your husband tries to be kind. But there is always the sense that you are being watched, evaluated, measured against the promises made at your wedding. Sometimes, you allow yourself to hope that things will be different for your daughters. You imagine a world where value is not a number, a field, or a cow, but a girl's laughter, her courage, her kindness. Until then, you live in the economy of purity, always aware of the price that was paid and the debt that lingers. Late at night, you whisper to yourself, "I am not for sale. I am not a price." The words are a small comfort, but they are yours. And in the quiet darkness, you promise to remember them, no matter what the world tries to make you believe. The memory of your own wedding night, the tension, the silent expectations, the careful inspection of linen, fades only to be replaced by a new kind of performance. Now, as a married woman, you find yourself living within another set of rules. At first, you thought marriage might mean freedom, or at least a loosening of the chains of childhood, but you quickly realize the world has only given you a new costume, not a new stage. You wake to your husband's quiet snoring, the early light dusting the wooden beams above your head, and for a moment you almost believe the world is yours. But the feeling slips away as the house stirs, his mother's voice from the kitchen, the thud of wood against the chopping block. You rise, braid your hair, and step into the role that has been written for you long before you ever spoke your first word. Days are full of chores, laughter in the kitchen, and the faintest hope that you might be allowed to make your own mark. But as you move through this new life, you find yourself constantly compared, not to other women of accomplishment or cleverness, but to the imaginary heroines of the songs sung in the square, to the stories told by wandering poets. The songs are always the same, the beautiful, silent maiden whose purity captures the heart of a prince, whose quiet obedience brings peace to a troubled land. They praise her virtue, her patience, her willingness to endure. You hear the lute and lyre drifting through the market, minstrels singing of legendary loves, impossible women, soft-voiced, gentle, untouched by hardship. You notice how the men nod along, some sighing wistfully as if these stories are not just fantasies but blueprints for real life. The songs become the standard by which you are judged, the unspoken yardstick against which every gesture, every silence, every decision is measured. Historians still argue whether the rise of courtly love, the poems and stories of pure, unreachable women, offered women any real power, or just replaced one impossible standard with another. Some say these tales gave women the power to say no, to set boundaries in the face of relentless pursuit. Others insist it simply gave men a new excuse to ignore a woman's true voice, to demand devotion while refusing to offer equality. You feel it every day. When you speak too freely at the market, someone inevitably compares you to the modest maidens of the old ballads. If you disagree with your husband, your mother-in-law shakes her head, lamenting that girls today aren't like the ladies in the songs. It's as if the world is haunted by the ghosts of women who never existed, and the living are left to play act their roles forever. You try at first to fit the mould. You practice speaking softly, smiling sweetly, folding your opinions into questions, your wit into jokes. It's easier, you find, to let people believe you are simple than to risk the sting of their disappointment. But as the days pass, you begin to sense the emptiness in the praise that comes your way. "She's so quiet," the neighbours say. "She knows her place." These are not compliments, they are warnings, reminders that you are only loved as long as you do not step beyond the story. And you see it in the men too. Your husband, who is kind but uncertain, seems lost in the gap between the real world and the world of the songs. He wants you to be like the women he's heard about, silent, gentle, always forgiving. But he is confused when you show anger, when you laugh too loudly, when you argue a point. Sometimes he looks at you as if you are a puzzle he cannot solve, as if he is searching for a script you have misplaced. At the gatherings in the village, the separation between the world of stories and the world of real women grows sharper. The poets and musicians perform for eager audiences, weaving tales of damsels and knights, of love won and lost on the battlefield of purity. Women listen with a mixture of envy and exhaustion, knowing they can never win at a game where the rules are set by people who have never played. You learn to spot the moments when the stories are used against you. A neighbour girl known for her cleverness is ridiculed for forgetting her place. Another, who dares to challenge her husband's decision, is scolded for dishonouring her house. You see how the tales of courtly love become a weapon, a way to silence any woman who tries to be more than the sum of her patience and her silence. At home, you try to find space for your real self. You carve out quiet moments in the garden, kneading bread or weeding rows of beans, where your thoughts can run wild and your voice is your own. Sometimes you gather with other women, your sisters, your friends, your mother-in-law when she's in a good mood, and share stories that are not fit for ballads. These are stories of laughter, mistakes, ambitions, and dreams. In these moments you feel whole, as if you might for a little while be more than the role you have been given. Historians still debate whether women of your station had more freedom than the songs suggest. Some point to letters, diaries, and court records that show women buying and selling property, making decisions for their households, even running small businesses when their husbands were away. Others argue that these moments were rare, and that for most women, the weight of expectation was too great to break. For you, the truth lives somewhere in the middle. You find ways to assert yourself, to make choices, to gently bend the rules. But every act of independence must be hidden behind a mask of modesty. Every clever idea is delivered as a suggestion, every disagreement softened by a smile. You become an expert in the art of invisible resistance, of getting your way without anyone realizing it was your idea. You see too how the stories of pure and obedient women are sometimes used to control the men as well. Your husband is taught to seek a perfect wife, silent, uncomplaining, forever forgiving. And he struggles when reality falls short of fantasy. You notice his frustration when you are angry, his confusion when you demand fairness, his sadness when you are unhappy. It is as if both of you are trapped, playing parts written by someone else, never allowed to write your own script. The world outside your door continues to change. New minstrels arrive with new songs, but the themes remain the same. The ideal woman is still unattainable, still silent, still pure. You wonder if things will ever change, if the day will come when stories are told of women who are brave, clever, loud, and real. You do what you can to keep hope alive. You teach your daughters to be kind, but also to think for themselves. You tell them stories of real women, women you have known, who faced hardship and fought back, who loved and lost and lived anyway. You remind them, quietly, that the songs are only stories, that the truth is always more complicated and more beautiful. Sometimes, late at night, you dream of standing in the village square surrounded by a crowd and telling your story in your own words, without music, without apology, without fear. You wake with your heart racing, your spirit both hopeful and tired. Historians still argue about the real impact of courtly love, about whether it lifted women up or pinned them down. But you know what it is to live in the space between the fantasy and the truth. You know the joy of friendship, the pain of disappointment, the quiet strength that grows from surviving another day. And so you continue. You listen to the songs, you smile at the compliments, you play your part as best you can. But you never forget who you really are, or what you want for the women who will come after you. You carry your story inside you, waiting for the day when the world is ready to listen. It starts, as so many dangers do, with a question. You're standing in the dim back corner of your new home, kneading dough alongside your sister-in-law, when she asks you something daring, something you know is better left unspoken in public. Have you ever wondered why some babies arrive early, or why Aunt Matilda uses certain herbs for women's pains? The question lingers in the warm air, heavier than the smell of yeast and flour. You hesitate, glancing over your shoulder to be sure the men are out of earshot. For a moment, you're tempted to answer honestly, to share what little you've learned from the older women. Hushed talk of herbs and cycles, superstitions and half-truths passed from mother to daughter like secret codes, but you stop yourself. Here, knowing too much is dangerous. From the earliest days, you learned that a girl who's curious about bodies, her own or anyone else's, is trouble. Your mother's warnings echo in your memory. It's better not to ask. It's better not to know. The world may sing of modesty and purity, but it also trembles with suspicion, ready to punish any girl who knows too much or speaks too freely. Historians still argue whether this silencing of women was a deliberate tool of control or simply an outgrowth of ignorance and fear. Some point to church edicts banning women from reading certain texts or practicing healing. Others see the threads of old folk wisdom quietly surviving in kitchen and field. The real knowledge carried on in whispers, never written down. You know that knowledge, real, practical knowledge, can save lives. You've seen it in the hands of midwives, in the careful preparations of teas and salves that soothe fever or bring relief. But you've also seen how easily that same wisdom can be twisted into suspicion. The line between healer and witch is thin, and a woman who can name the parts of a body or predict the rhythm of the seasons is sometimes praised, more often feared. The stories come to you in fragments. A girl who was caught with a book about healing, banished to a distant relative. An old widow who saved half the village from a bad winter, then found herself accused of dark arts the next spring, when the calves were stillborn. Sometimes the crime is simply knowing where the wild herbs grow, or remembering which roots to boil for pain. Your own household is no exception. You watch how the older women share their knowledge in code. For a cough, try the leaf that grows near the stream, or don't let the men see you using that root. They trust only each other, and sometimes not even that. There are secrets within secrets, and you realise that what you know can be both a comfort and a curse. You remember the night your neighbour went into labour too early, her cries carrying down the lane in the cold dark. The midwife came, bringing with her not only hands but knowledge, when to push, when to wait, how to read the body's signs. She saved both mother and child that night, but you heard the whispers the next day. How did she know what to do? Isn't it strange the way she never married? In this world, every woman who knows too much walks a narrow path. Your purity, so carefully guarded, so loudly praised, becomes almost irrelevant if people suspect you of other kinds of knowledge. You see it in the priest's sermons warning against idle curiosity and women's chatter. You hear it in the stories told around the hearth, where clever girls always come to bad ends. You notice too that there is a special kind of danger for women who ask about things the men prefer to keep mysterious. Money, trade, the running of the farm. Your husband laughs when you ask about accounts, but the laughter is uneasy. His mother pulls you aside, cautioning you to leave such matters to the men. A clever woman, she says, must be careful not to show it. You learn to ask your questions in ways that seem harmless, to hide your knowledge behind gentle smiles. Historians debate whether these limits on knowledge were enforced more harshly in some times and places than others. Some women, especially in towns or among the nobility, found ways to learn and teach. Secret schools, hidden books, alliances with sympathetic priests or brothers. Others risked everything to keep their wisdom alive. You hear stories of women who became famous for their cures, who were called upon by nobles and peasants alike, but who always lived with one foot in shadow. Sometimes you wonder if things will ever change. You dream of a world where your knowledge is valued, not feared, where girls learn to read, to heal, to count and calculate. You imagine a day when you might speak freely about what you know, when a question is a doorway, not a trap. But for now, you live with the fear. You watch as women guard their words, choosing carefully when and how to share what they know. You learn to speak in riddles, to tell jokes that hide the truth, to trust only those who have earned your faith. Your opinions on the body, on childbirth, on sickness and health, these are treasures you keep hidden, brought out only in the safety of other women's company. In rare moments, you find comfort in rebellion. You see a group of girls sneak away to the fields at dusk, laughing as they test old remedies on bruised knees or bee stings. You hear the quiet pride in the healer's voice as she explains the properties of mint and lavender, always careful to say, "My grandmother taught me this," as if tradition will keep her safe. You also notice the price of silence. You see girls fall ill with fevers no one knows how to treat, women miscarrying in secret because no one dares ask for help. You hear the stories of the young brides sent away, shamed and frightened, because they did not know what to expect on their wedding night. In these moments you rage at the injustice, at the cost of ignorance, at the pain caused by rules that serve only to keep everyone afraid. Sometimes you share a joke with your sister-in-law, a joke only women would understand. Maybe if men had to give birth, they'd invent better remedies. The laughter is quiet, but it carries a truth no law can erase. Historians still argue whether the silencing of women's knowledge was a conscious plot, or simply the side effect of a world built on fear. Some say the rise of universities, closed to women, marked the end of female healers' influence. Others point out that women found ways to survive, adapting, hiding, teaching in secret. For you, the truth is in the lived reality. You must be careful, you must be quiet, but you must also remember, knowledge can be passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, even in the face of suspicion. One evening, as you gather with the older women in the village, you listen as they share stories, each tale a lesson wrapped in laughter, each joke a veiled warning. You realize that your opinions, your insights, your understanding of the world are part of a legacy far older and stronger than the rules that try to contain you. You tell yourself that you will not be silenced, not completely. You will find ways to keep asking, to keep learning, to keep sharing. And you promise yourself that when your daughter asks a question, you will answer her honestly no matter the risk. In the quiet dark, you hold this promise close, a secret power no one can take from you. You are more than your silence, more than your purity. You are a woman who knows, and in that knowing you are free, if only for a moment, if only in your dreams. You learn to live with the tension, the tightrope walk of saying just enough but never too much, of appearing useful but not threatening, of being present but never the centre of the story. For a time, this delicate dance seems to work. You manage your household, you gain the trust of your husband's family, you even begin to find small joys in the quiet rituals of your days. But all along, you know your position is more fragile than it appears. In this world, a woman is valued for her purity, and once that is gone, by choice, by fate, or simply by the passage of time, her place in society becomes painfully uncertain. You see this most clearly in the lives of widows and divorced women. From the outside, the village might appear warm and tightly knit, but the truth is that it has little patience for those who no longer fit the mould. When a woman loses her husband, the gossip begins almost immediately. Sometimes there is pity, especially if her marriage was happy or her husband was well liked. But more often, there is suspicion. What will she do now? Will she try to ensnare another man? Did she mourn enough? Did she mourn too much? For a woman who once embodied the ideal of quiet purity, her very survival now depends on how she handles this dangerous new freedom. You remember the first widow you ever truly noticed? She lived near the edge of town, in a small cottage half hidden by brambles. She was neither young nor particularly old, just a woman alone, with no one to speak for her. At market she stood by herself, buying small amounts of flour, never enough for a feast. She spoke quietly, rarely laughing, but you saw how people watched her out of the corners of their eyes. She was no longer pure, but she was not yet old enough to be harmless. When she smiled at your brother one day, you overheard your mother muttering, "Careful, a widow's heart is hungry." Historians still argue about the place of widows in medieval society. Some documents show widows running businesses, even holding property in their own names, a rare kind of independence, granted only because there is no man to claim authority over them. Others tell a darker tale, widows shunned, accused of witchcraft, or forced into remarriage with men they barely know. The difference, it seems, is often determined by luck, by the protection of a powerful family, or the goodwill of a priest, or simply by keeping one's head down and one's reputation spotless. Divorced women are even more invisible. The church frowns on divorce, and while separations sometimes happen, when a husband vanishes, or when a marriage is simply too dangerous to continue, the result is almost always social exile. You hear stories of women sent to distant villages, of girls told to forget their mothers' names, of entire families pretending a daughter never existed. If purity is the coin of a woman's worth, a broken marriage is proof the coin has lost its shine. You watch the way the village treats these women. Some are pitied, others feared, still others simply ignored. The message is clear. Once you step outside the boundaries of what is considered acceptable, your story no longer fits, and so you are quietly erased. A widow's wisdom is suspect, her independence is dangerous, her affection, should she dare show it, a reason for mistrust. A divorced woman is something even worse, a reminder that marriage is not always safe, that purity can be lost for reasons beyond anyone's control. And yet, you also see moments of quiet rebellion. The widow at the edge of town tends her garden and keeps her home in order. She knows the herbs that cure a cough and the prayers that keep nightmares at bay. Sometimes you see other women slip away to her cottage seeking advice, trading stories, asking for help with a difficult birth or a sick child. It is as if, in her exile, she has gathered a different kind of power, a network built not on public approval, but on quiet trust. You notice too how widows and divorced women keep each other's secrets. You hear the laughter from behind closed doors, the clink of mugs, the low voices discussing things no one else would dare mention. They become in some ways the guardians of truth, the ones who know what is really possible for a woman who is no longer watched, who has nothing left to lose. Historians debate whether these women were truly free or simply forced into new kinds of captivity. Some widows, especially wealthy ones, used their independence to support convents, patronize the arts, even advise kings. Others lived under suspicion, their every move watched for signs of scandal. You realize the reality is rarely so simple. For every woman who found strength in her solitude, another was broken by it. You begin to think differently about the rules you once took for granted. As a young girl, you believed purity was the only measure of worth, that a woman's story ended with marriage or disgrace. Now, you see there are other chapters, messier, quieter, but sometimes more true. You see that life does not always divide neatly between good and bad, pure and fallen. Sometimes, the most courageous thing a woman can do is to survive, even when the world refuses to see her. In the evenings, you walk past the widow's cottage and see the light glowing through her window. Sometimes, you think about knocking, about asking her how she endures, but you are afraid of what she might say, afraid you might see your own future reflected in her eyes. You hear other stories too, of a divorced woman who disguised herself as a man to work in the city, of a widow who travelled as a merchant, carrying silk and spices from port to port, of women who joined together, pooling their resources to build small communities on the fringes of society. These stories are rarely celebrated, but they linger in the shadows. proof that even the most unwanted women can find ways to live, to help each other, to create meaning in a world that prefers to forget them. Sometimes you try to imagine what it would feel like to be truly invisible. Not the invisibility of a girl trying to escape notice, but the deeper invisibility of a woman who no longer fits any of the roles the world provides. Would it be lonely? Would it be freeing? Would you miss the weight of other people's expectations, or would you finally breathe easy, untethered from the constant fear of judgment? You share your questions in whispers with your closest friends, late at night when the world is quiet and your guard is down. Some are afraid of what might happen if they ever lose their place. Others are quietly defiant, certain that they could build something better for themselves if only they were given the chance. You realize gradually that there is a quiet solidarity among women on the margins. They look out for each other, share resources, offer kindness that is never announced but always understood. There is no feast day or celebration for their bravery, no song sung in their honor, but you begin to see them as a different kind of heroine, not praised for their purity, but for their endurance, their wisdom, their unwillingness to disappear. You wonder what the world would be like if these stories were told more often. If girls grew up hearing that it is possible to survive loss, to find friendship in unlikely places, to begin again when everything seems lost. You imagine a world where a woman's value is not tied forever to a single moment or a single choice, but is allowed to grow and change with her. Historians still argue about the boundaries of respectability in the Middle Ages. In some records, widows and divorced women vanish entirely, as if they never existed. In others, their names crop up in court cases, in wills, in letters home from distant sons. The truth is that for every woman whose story was erased, there are others who wrote new ones in secret, whose courage made space for all who came after. As you move through your own life, you carry these stories with you. You learn to look past the easy judgments, to listen for the voices that linger in the corners. You remind yourself every day that your worth does not depend on the world's approval. And when you find yourself slipping into silence, you remember the widow's lamp, the laughter behind closed doors, the quiet strength of women who refuse to vanish. You promise yourself that no matter what happens, you will not let your story be erased. You will keep speaking, keep helping, keep living in defiance of a world that tries to make you invisible. You are more than your purity, more than your marriage, more than your mistakes. You are in the end simply and stubbornly yourself, and that you realize may be the greatest victory of all. You're kneeling at the altar rail, the candlelight flickering on polished stone, when you notice her. Eyes lowered, hands folded so tightly you see her knuckles blanch. The statue of the Virgin Mary towers overhead, her painted lips forever closed, her blue mantle immaculate and serene. You glance at her face every time you come to church. In this world, every girl grows up with Mary's image hovering over her shoulder, a constant silent judge, a model you're told to follow but can never quite reach. From your earliest memories, the Virgin Mary is everywhere, embroidered on altar cloths, painted above doorways, tucked in the pockets of travellers for protection. You hear her story in every season, every sermon. She is purity incarnate, a mother who was never touched, a woman so perfect that no word of hers is ever out of place. She's called Blessed, Holy, the Queen of Heaven, and every girl in the village is told over and over to be like her, gentle, quiet, obedient, pure. Historians still argue whether medieval women found comfort in Mary's example, or if they suffered under the impossible weight of her perfection. Some say she was a source of solace, a friend to the lonely and afraid. Others point out that her story was used to set standards no human could achieve, that her perfection made every ordinary girl feel permanently unworthy. You remember the first time you realized that Mary was different from every other woman in the stories you knew. She was never angry, never afraid, never loud or disobedient. She never questioned, never stumbled, never failed. The priests say she was chosen because of her humility, her readiness to say yes to God. But you wonder, what would have happened if she'd said no? What if she had been afraid or stubborn, or simply wanted a different life? You notice too how the village uses Mary's story to judge every woman. She's like the Virgin, they say, of a quiet girl who never argues, who lowers her eyes and speaks in whispers. Not like her, they say, when a girl runs too fast or laughs too loudly, or is seen talking with the baker's son after dusk. The Virgin Mary becomes the standard against which every woman is measured, and no one, not even the best among you, can measure up. You know the routine now. Every month the same hush falls over the house when you ask your mother for a cloth. The same quick glance is exchanged if you pause a little too long on your way back from the stream. You're supposed to ignore your body, to treat it as an afterthought. But your body has its own opinions, its own rhythms and aches, and the medieval world has no shortage of wild theories about what's happening beneath your skin. You hear the stories from the older women first, half warning, half joke. Don't drink cold water during your time, one aunt tells you. It'll freeze the blood. Another warns, never let a man see you with your hair unbound. He'll know your secrets. You nod and smile even as you wonder what secrets your hair could possibly hold. But when you listen closely, you realize these warnings aren't just superstition. They are survival, coded messages meant to protect you from the endless guessing game that is medieval medicine. Historians still argue about the level of knowledge people truly had about women's health in these times. There were learned doctors at universities debating the humours, and monks copying the words of Galen and Hippocrates in dusty scriptoria. There were midwives who knew, from bitter experience, how to help a woman give birth or what root to chew for pain. But there was also confusion, suspicion, and, more often than not, blame. In your world, a woman's purity isn't just a moral condition, it's a medical mystery, the subject of debate and endless speculation. You overhear men in the tavern discussing whether a woman can lose her purity by riding a horse too fast or jumping over a stream. There are doctors who claim the veil is proof of untouched virtue, that it should be examined like any other sign of health. And then there are the more lurid stories, a neighbour's cousin who was said to have lost herself by falling out of a tree, or a bride who fainted at her wedding and was accused of hiding some shameful secret. You soon discover that you are not supposed to understand your own body. If you ask too many questions, you are immodest. If you admit to pain or confusion, you risk being dismissed, or worse, accused of something you didn't do. Your mother and aunts tell you what they can, but always in whispers, always with a glance over their shoulders. Even the words for your body's changes are shrouded in euphemism. Your curse, your flowering, your monthly visitor. There is a whole vocabulary of secrets, passed from woman to woman and never uttered in front of men. You notice the differences between what the women know and what the doctors say. The village healer relies on observation, on the memory of years of births and deaths, of fevers and healings. She teaches you how to make a poultice for a burn, how to recognize the signs of a dangerous pregnancy. But she also warns you never to let a stranger see you tending a wound, never to admit how much you know. A clever girl, she says, keeps her knowledge for the right company. You overhear stories about wandering wombs and hysterical vapours. You're told that a woman's body is delicate, unpredictable, and prone to madness. There are tales of girls sent to convents for their own safety, or for the safety of others. If you faint, if you speak out of turn, if you show too much emotion, someone is sure to blame your body, even when the problem has nothing to do with your body at all. You wonder if the doctors truly believe their own theories. Some seem certain, others hedge their bets, offering contradictory advice in the same breath. Drink more wine, one says, but not too much. Rest, but keep busy. Eat sweets, but avoid them. You realise that the truth changes depending on who is listening and what is at stake. Sometimes you feel like an experiment, a puzzle everyone is trying to solve. You watch as your pregnant cousin is prodded and fussed over, her cravings discussed as if they were omens. If a baby is born with a birthmark, the midwives trade theories. Maybe it's the mother's fault. Maybe she saw something strange or ate the wrong food. You see how easily blame can shift, how quickly a mother can become the cause of any problem. Historians debate how much power women actually had in managing their own health. Some records show women prescribing their own treatments, gathering herbs, keeping careful notes on births and deaths. Others tell stories of women punished for knowing too much, or for treating illness outside the boundaries of church or law. You understand that the answer, as always, is complicated. Knowledge is a kind of power, but it is a dangerous one. Your own experiences teach you the limits of what you can say. When you are ill, you downplay your symptoms, afraid to attract attention. When you need help, you ask for it quietly, hoping only the right people hear. You learn to read between the lines of advice, to gather information from stories and hints rather than direct instruction. There are moments of humour too. You and your friends compare notes on remedies, what works, what doesn't. You laugh about the time someone claimed that eating too many apples would make your hair fall out, or that touching a toad would keep boys away forever. The laughter is a relief, a small rebellion against a world that refuses to let you own your own body. Sometimes you hear about medical experts from faraway cities, men with books and degrees who make grand claims about what women need. Their advice trickles down through priests and lords, changing little by the time it reaches your ears. You're told to fast, to pray, to wear charms against sickness. You do what you must, but you trust your mother and your own instincts far more than any doctor you've never met. You notice too that the same men who claim to understand women's bodies are often the ones who know the least. They fear what they cannot see, inventing explanations for things they do not want to understand. You see how their fear shapes the rules you live by, how it feeds the suspicion and secrecy that surround every aspect of your health. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to have real answers. You dream of a world where women can speak openly about their bodies, where knowledge is shared, not hidden. You wish for a time when questions are welcomed, not punished, when curiosity is seen as strength rather than a flaw. Historians still argue whether medical ignorance was inevitable, or if it was enforced by the rules of a society afraid of women's power. You suspect both are true. There are moments when you feel the weight of centuries pressing down, when you wonder if anything will ever change. But then, there are moments of hope. You see a girl slip a sprig of sage into her pocket just as her grandmother taught her. You watch the healer teach a new mother how to soothe a colicky baby, sharing wisdom that no doctor could ever learn from a book. You realise that despite the confusion and fear, there is a thread of knowledge running through your life. Passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, you vow to keep asking questions, even if you must ask them in secret. You promise to teach your daughters everything you can, to tell them the truth as best you know it. You remind yourself that your body is not a mystery to be solved, but a part of you, strong and wise in ways the world refuses to see. Late at night, as you listen to the wind in the eaves, you whisper your questions to the dark. Some are answered, some are not. But you refuse to stop asking, to stop learning, to stop believing that knowledge is worth the risk. You are more than a puzzle, more than a rumour, more than the sum of what others say about you. You are a woman, alive and thinking, imperfect and whole. And though the world may never understand your body, you do. That, you decide, is enough. You're older now, no longer the girl peeking out from behind her mother's skirts or listening at doorways for scraps of knowledge. The lessons of your youth, about purity, silence, and what is expected, have sunk deep into your bones, but experience has shaped them, rounded their sharp edges. You have lived through the rituals, survived the tests, watched friends stumble or disappear. You've been a daughter, a bride, a wife, maybe now a mother yourself. And with every passing season, you understand more clearly how deeply the idea of purity shapes not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. It's spring, and the world outside is bursting with colour. Apple blossoms drift like confetti on the breeze, lambs stagger on new legs in the meadow, and the air smells of wet earth and promise. You move through your days with a mixture of nostalgia and resignation, noticing the ways the cycle repeats. Your younger sister is now the one being reminded to walk modestly, to mind her words, to keep to the safe side of every story. You watch her struggle with the same questions you once did. You see in her the hope that things might be different, the stubborn refusal to give in entirely to a future already written. You're a mother now, perhaps, or an aunt. The next generation looks to you for answers. Your nieces and daughters ask why some girls are prized more than others, why men can laugh and joke while women must walk carefully, why mothers and grandmothers always seem to be watching, always measuring. Sometimes you answer them gently, repeating the stories you were told. Other times you hesitate, remembering the confusion and resentment of your own youth. You want to prepare them, to keep them safe, but you also want to leave the door open for something new. Historians still argue whether women were complicit in the system, or simply making the best of the narrow options available. Was every mother who warned her daughter to be silent and pure protecting her, or imprisoning her? Did the rules about purity survive because women believed in them, or because resistance meant risking everything? You look at your own mother, now growing older, and wonder how much of what she taught you was love, and how much was fear. In your house, daily life is a constant negotiation between what is allowed and what is possible. The men discuss crops and taxes, the women exchange recipes and hints in whispers. Every decision, a new dress, a visit to a neighbour, a laugh at the wrong moment, feels weighted. You see how your own behaviour shapes the opinions of others. If you're too cheerful, someone wonders if you're hiding something. If you're too sombre, they assume you are unhappy. The safest path is always in the middle, never too much of anything. You have become a master of moderation, and you're not sure whether to be proud or mournful. Your daughters watch you closely. They copy your gestures, your phrases, even your hesitations. They learn, just as you did, that silence is safety and compliance is rewarded. But they also learn in secret that there are other ways to exist. In the quiet of the kitchen, you teach them how to make bread, how to tend wounds, how to listen and observe. But you also pass on small bits of rebellion. A quick joke about a foolish priest, a story about a girl who outwitted her elders, a warning about trusting only those who have earned it. You remember your own girlhood friends, where they are now, what became of them. Some married well, others less so. Some were sent away, others simply faded into the background, their names forgotten but their lessons lingering. You realise that every woman you have ever known carries a mixture of pride and regret, memory and longing, and that every one of you, in your own way, has survived. There are new challenges too as the world changes around you. A travelling priest brings stories of faraway places, of women who read and write, who speak their minds, who lead. At first, the stories seem like fairy tales, impossible dreams, but gradually you notice the effect. Young women start to ask questions, to read more, to whisper about what might be possible if the rules were just a little less strict. Historians still debate the influence of outside ideas on village life. Some say nothing really changed until centuries later. Others argue that the seeds of rebellion were always there, waiting for the right moment to sprout. You see the signs yourself. A daughter who challenges her father's decisions, a widow who refuses to remarry, a group of girls who form their own circle of friendship and support, outside the eyes of mothers and priests. You become more protective of these moments, recognizing them as rare and precious. You encourage your daughters to listen and to question, to find strength in each other, to trust themselves. You caution them too not to be reckless, not to give the world a reason to shut them away or mark them as lost. You know how quickly things can change, how fragile safety really is. In your own heart, you struggle with the legacy you will leave behind. Will you be remembered as a guardian of tradition, or as the one who quietly made space for change? Will your daughters thank you for your caution, or resent you for your fear? The questions have no easy answers. You realise that every choice you make is shaped by the choices of the women who came before you, and that the future will be shaped by the choices you make now. There is a growing sense of possibility, a shift in the air even if it is just a whisper. You see it in the way girls gather at the well, exchanging secrets and daring each other to dream. You see it in the laughter that sometimes rings out at the wrong moment, in the stories that travel from house to house, gathering speed and force. You wonder what will happen, when the old ways can no longer hold, when a new generation refuses to be silent. In the quiet of evening, after the day's work is done and the house has settled into calm, you find yourself alone in the garden. The moon is high, the air cool and sweet. You think about your own journey, from girl to woman to mother to perhaps something more. You realise that for all the pressure to be pure, for all the rules and rituals and stories, you have built a life that is your own. You remember the girl you once were, curious, stubborn, afraid, hopeful. You see her in your daughters and nieces, in the neighbour girls who pass by with flowers in their hair and dreams in their eyes. You want to tell them everything you've learned, that the world is hard and unfair, but also beautiful and full of possibility, that they are stronger than they know, that purity is only one part of a story, not its end. Historians still argue about what changed and what stayed the same for women like you. Some say your world was a cage, others say it was a fortress. For you, it has been both, and a garden too, full of moments of grace and growth, sorrow and joy. You take a deep breath and promise yourself to keep going, to keep hoping, to keep teaching and laughing and living. You are not just a symbol of purity or a keeper of the old traditions. You are a woman, real, imperfect, resilient, and you are not alone. As the stars wheel overhead, you feel a quiet pride and a hope that the next generation will step a little more boldly, speak a little more freely, and find ways to value themselves for all that they are. You rise with the sun, as always. Your bones ache a little more than they used to, but there is comfort in the way the morning light drapes itself across the floorboards, in the steady clatter of wooden spoons and voices downstairs. Another day, another cycle. The world, you realise, does not pause for anyone's weariness, least of all a woman's. Still, you move through your morning with a sense of familiarity. You have learned, over the years, to make the small routines sacred. Today, your house is busy with visitors. The younger girls, your daughters, nieces, the neighbour's child, are gathered in the kitchen, braiding bread, laughing quietly when they think the elders aren't listening. Their voices are lighter than yours ever were at their age, their faces quick to smile, their eyes darting with the thrill of secret hopes. You watch them from the doorway, remembering how once you longed to be as free. Yet you know, as every woman before you has known, that the lessons of your youth will always hover at the edge of their lives. There is a weight to being a woman here, an inheritance passed from hand to hand. Walk carefully, speak softly, be pure, or at least appear so. You recognise the anxiety that flickers in your eldest's eyes when she's caught whispering with a boy in the garden. You see the way your sister's daughter smooths her skirt before entering a room full of men, lowering her eyes and hiding her clever tongue. These things are learned, never openly taught, but they are as much a part of you as the curve of your nose or the shape of your hands. You help the girls shape dough, telling them the stories that have always accompanied such work. The neighbour whose bread once rose so high, the priest declared it a miracle. The old grandmother who swore that singing sweetly while kneading would ensure a happy marriage. There is laughter, but also a kind of seriousness, as if the dough itself contains more than flour and water, something sacred, something inherited. Outside, the world continues to judge by old standards. You see the way the village women keep watch from their windows, ready to notice if a girl lingers too long in the company of a boy, or returns from the market with her hair mussed or her eyes bright with secrets. You know that even now, as a woman grown, you are never truly free of this gaze. The stories told about you as a girl, how well you obeyed, how well you kept your purity, have followed you into adulthood, shaping the invitations you receive, the trust others offer, even the respect your own children receive. Historians still argue about the legacy of all this careful watching, whether it made women more united in their silence or drove them apart, always afraid that a single mistake would be reported, repeated, remembered. Some say these habits forged sisterhoods, invisible alliances among women who understood each other's struggles. Others believe the constant competition and suspicion left women more alone than ever, each protecting her reputation at the expense of someone else's. You see both sides. There are days when you are grateful for the women who share your burdens, who pass along wisdom, who offer comfort in quiet moments. There are other days, though, when you sense the judgment behind a smile, the calculation in a friend's advice. You realize that every compliment carries a warning, every warning a quiet threat. You try to give your daughters more space than you had, to let them speak their minds and test the boundaries. Yet you find yourself repeating the old cautions. Be careful what you say. Remember who's watching. Don't give them a reason to talk. You wish you could promise them a world without judgment, but you know you would be lying. The rituals run deep, so deep that sometimes you find yourself enforcing them without meaning to. The church bells ring for a feast day, and the village gathers in the square. You see girls dressed in their best, eyes downcast, lips pursed in polite smiles. The elders praise them for their good manners, for their innocence. You listen as stories are told, stories about saints and virgins, about the dangers of pride, about the power of keeping quiet. You notice the girls' faces, a mix of pride and anxiety, each one wondering whether she is doing enough, whether she will be enough. You watch as a girl is singled out for praise, her virtue held up as an example. You see the discomfort flicker in her eyes, the way she tries to shrink away from attention. You remember how this feels, how praise can be as heavy as condemnation, how even the highest pedestal can feel like a cage. Later, you sit with the other women on a bench beneath the linden trees, your hands busy with mending, your voices low. You share news, advice, and warnings. Someone mentions a neighbour whose daughter was seen walking too late in the evening. There is a ripple of sympathy, but also the quiet relief that this time, it is not your child under scrutiny. You notice too that the older you grow, the less people listen to your opinions. There is respect, yes, but also distance. You are valued for your patience, your experience, your ability to keep the household running, but your ideas for change, your observations about what might be better are gently dismissed. The world seems to want you to become more and more silent, to fade into the background, to become the wise but voiceless grandmother, the keeper of secrets, never their breaker. Historians debate whether old age brought women more power or simply more invisibility. You feel both at once, the comfort of being left alone and the sting of no longer being seen. You realize, with a mix of sadness and freedom, that you could shout your wildest dreams from the rooftop and few would care enough to listen. The rituals have done their work. You're no longer dangerous, no longer the subject of anyone's curiosity. And yet, in quiet ways, you pass on what you've learned. You show the girls how to stand tall, how to ask questions safely, how to hide a joke in a smile. You tell them stories of women who dared, who broke the rules and survived. Sometimes you see the spark of rebellion in their eyes, and you feel both fear and hope for them. Maybe they will find a way to live more freely, to make space for their own voices, to build something new on the foundation of what you have handed down. You wonder what the future holds, whether the next generation will be able to break free of the cycle, to make their own choices about what matters. You know the world is slow to change, but you see signs, tiny, hopeful signs that things are shifting. Girls laugh a little louder, boys learn to listen a little better, mothers whisper secrets to their daughters and add, "But you must decide for yourself." As evening falls and the house grows quiet, you sit at the window, watching the last light fade from the sky. You think about all the women you've known, all the stories you have heard and lived. You think of purity, not as the sum of your worth, but as one thread in the tapestry of your life. You see finally that you are more than what the world wanted you to be. You rise slowly as the girls begin to clear the table, laughter still bright on their lips. You know their journey will be hard, but you hope they will walk it with courage. You know you have given them both a burden and a gift, the wisdom of caution, but also the quiet permission to rebel. You promise yourself that as long as you live, you will keep telling the real stories, the stories of survival, of small victories, of women who found a way. You will tell your daughters and granddaughters that their worth cannot be measured by any single standard. You will remind them, always, that their voices matter. As night settles in, you let yourself rest. The house is quiet, the world is unchanged, but you know the seeds of something different are already planted. In your silence, in your speech, in your hope, you are still here, and so are they. Now, as you settle into bed, the house quiet around you and the weight of history resting gently on your shoulders, let your breath slow. The world outside is dark, the village hushed, and the long, tangled threads of your story have softened into a gentle lull. All those lessons, all those silent hopes float softly around you, no longer heavy but light as feathers, drifting on the night air. You remember all the women who came before, mothers, sisters, friends, each one shaping the path, smoothing a little of the way, or leaving small signs for you to follow in the dark. You honour the fears that kept you safe, but you also honour the dreams that flickered stubbornly, refusing to be snuffed out. Tonight, you let the rituals and the rules slip away for a little while. You let yourself imagine a world where laughter is easy and kindness is enough, where no one is measured by what cannot be seen. You feel the slow comfort of belonging, of having survived, of having given the next generation a little more light than you were given. The house breathes with you, quiet, calm, safe. You close your eyes and let the story fade into warmth and peace, knowing that you are not alone, that the struggle and the hope, the pain and the joy are shared, that somewhere out there, others are resting too, carried gently by the same long current of women's stories. So for now, dim the lights, let your shoulders relax, let the world slip away. You're safe, you're home, you are enough. Sweet dreams.